Good morning. This is the sermon that I recorded on Sunday for Matthew 25, 1 through 13. I'm re-recording it because the sound wasn't very good. So you get the office today. Here we are. I don't know about you, but I tried to ignore mostly what was happening this past week. I felt it did me no good to get tense, anxious, or upset about the election. But I'm glad that we are getting all the votes counted for everyone who took the effort to vote. I thank all of you who voted. This sermon was really hard for me to put together. I worked on it Wednesday, then Thursday, then Friday, then Saturday. And I made many, many changes along the way. It was hard because I didn't know what to say to you today. Be upbeat. We have no outcome. Then be upbeat because we do have an outcome. Or don't be upbeat because we have an outcome. In the end, my hope is that some part of my rambling gets your attention, speaks to you in some little or maybe not so little way. The story today, which is another of Jesus's parables, struck me when I was working on this sermon on Wednesday morning. That's when I started drafting it. Finished it on Saturday evening. But it's 2020. What else can be going on that's messed up? I don't know about you, but the end of this parable really struck me as something I had just seen on the morning news. The president said all vote counting should stop because the clock had rolled past midnight of November 3rd. Isn't that like closing the door and not letting anyone in? Like what happened to those bridesmaids that were not prepared? There's a big difference in this parable and the reality of our voting. Those who voted by mail, who had their ballots in on time, they were legitimate ballots. So we have a valid election, and we have valid votes, and we will see what happens in the next few weeks, I hope, maybe few days. The people in Matthew's time, the previous generation from when he wrote this, they thought that Jesus was going to return to this earth in a short period of time. By the time Matthew wrote this, we had moved on to a new generation, and the delay was long. People were being told to just chill, as we are being asked to do today. Let everything run its natural course. I was reading a commentary by Catherine Matthews, the former dean of the Amistad Chapel at the UCC headquarters. And she wrote this: Today we are 2,000 years of delay later, and our questions may be just as pressing. What are we to do? What does ready look like for people of faith? When will things change? What is God going to do about the mess that we are in? We even have to wonder, unlike any generation before us, if we ourselves will bring an end to the earth, or at least to life upon it. When will our enemies get what they deserve? Wow, those are really interesting questions. We're going to look at some of them. Well, all of them. What are we to do? Well, I don't have an answer for that one, at least not one that I think we will all agree on. But I do hope we can agree on this. We must continue to have faith in God, in Jesus, and in the Spirit for guidance, calm, and hope. That's very broad, but having faith in God is not so broad. At least I believe it isn't for Christians. Isn't that what is underlying in our faith? It is for me. In today's parable, who thinks the bridesmaids who would not share their oil were being selfish? Who thinks the girls who didn't bring extra oil should have been made to go get their own? Many scholars think that this is about patience, something that we lack these days. Well, most of us anyway. I'm guilty of that. Does this remind you that sometimes you need to prepare for a delay? Isn't that what we have been hearing for a few weeks? That we are going to have to wait to hear the outcome of the election? Well, it took 5 days, more or less, and it's continuing. We are not a patient people. Some of those bridesmaids were prepared for the delay of the groom and had extra oil for their lamp. The others were not ready. They anticipated the timeline for the groom's appearance and they left no margin for error. They looked foolish when they were locked out of the banquet. Maybe we should think about that, our expectations of time. We often presume that we have all the time in the world to tend to certain matters. Building a broken relationship, learning a new skill, offering a needed word of gratitude or forgiveness, deepening our relationship with God. We put off today that which we presumably should be done tomorrow. As in our parable, putting off something can lead to us finding that we waited too long. It has been said about this parable that the foolish assume a bright future, but do little to prepare for it. So if you've hurt someone, apologize. If you're angry with someone, with an anger that is hanging on, talk to that person about it. Don't put off what can be done now, because so many people have regrets after someone dies. Regrets that they did not do what they now feel was important to do. Maybe like apologize or listen to another side of the story. Catherine's next question, what does ready look like for people of faith? Wow, that one has no right or wrong answers. But I believe it is an individual answer, but it can be a collective answer as well. For me personally, being ready, and here I guess I must say ready for the end of times, just so there's not mistaking it for something else we need to be ready for. So for me personally, I have to be a person who has empathy for others, who is looking out for the least of these, as Jesus tells us time and time again we must do. This becomes a collective answer when we see the many people coming together around the world for a common cause. Take the Paris Climate Agreement. Many of the world's nations have agreed to help stop the damage we are causing to the earth. Unfortunately, the United States has withdrawn from that agreement. This is not what I think Jesus would approve of. Helping each other, doing what is for the common good. That is the way to be. Not to look solely at profits from resources that are killing us and killing the planet. Another example is the actions that have been taking place around the world asking for, fighting for in some cases, racial justice and equality. Many countries are so far ahead of the US in this, yet we saw support in countries around the world this summer. That's something I think the whole world can be proud of. When you mirror that with what is going on in France with the terrible Islamophobia happening there, perhaps it's time the US joined the French people in asking for togetherness, to condemn what has been happening. It's again becoming an us and a them, an othering of people, of a culture, and of a religion. Catherine asks us, when will things change? Well, you know the answer to this, don't you? Things will change when a dedicated group of folks stand up for change. When there are people who can come together around an issue. More importantly, I believe that change will come and that change can happen when people sit down and talk through an issue. Not when they tear gas the other, not when they refuse to acknowledge the others. Change happens when hearts and minds are open, when people listen and hear. We are asked, what is God going to do about the mess we are in? Well, your guess is as good as mine. But I think that what will happen is that we will have to do some soul searching, if you will. We have to pray about it. But more importantly, we have to let others, and that includes God, know how we feel. I often say, and I really mean it, that God hears our prayers. And I also say that those prayers are not always answered in the way we expect the outcome to be, but they are answered. So, I will say, if you don't pray, God won't know what you want. Maybe that's not totally true, but I think that your connection with God, with your divine, will help us get through this mess on to the other side. This week, I've been praying that we would have a change in our leadership. For about the last 4 years, I've been praying that our leader won't lead us to war, that the planet will begin to heal itself with our help, and that there is an end to many of the isms that we like to label things with. Racism is one of the biggest isms in our country now. No, that's not true. Racism has finally been brought again to the forefront, that those who fought for civil rights in the 60s see the movement again. I think we got complacent. We passed the legislation, so we thought we are all equal. Well, some of today's bridesmaids were complacent. They expected the groom to arrive on their schedule, and that did not happen. So they were without enough oil for their lamps, and consequently, they get locked out of the banquet. When will our enemies get what they deserve? Well, that's a big question. We have to first ask ourselves, who are our enemies in this time? Based upon the last year, we know who our enemy is, COVID. That's the world's enemy right now. But I would venture a guess that Catherine was thinking about people enemies. When will they get what they deserve? Some could say that Republican senators are the enemy. They seem to block everything that would advance health care, help people on the margins, move the country forward towards togetherness. Still others might say it's the Democrats in the House, who can't seem to let go of their tight-held feelings and beliefs. It's a them and us. Across the aisle, they can't talk. Many will say that the enemy is the others, those that we have always put on margins, those who we don't agree with, who worship different gods than us, who look different than we do, who love someone like themselves, who need to be honest with themselves and live as they feel is right for them. When will they get what they deserve? Well, for some, you might say they are getting what they deserve. LGBTQ rights have advanced in recent times. True, those rights are somewhat being eroded, but hopefully all of those will be restored. And we're seeing more and more companies take a stand to protect the environment. They were enemies of the planet, and they are now becoming slowly stewards of the planet. So you could say that they too are getting what they deserve. They are making a change at the request of their customers. So the customers too are getting what they deserve. A world without greenhouse gases, clean air and water, basic rights restored to many, health care for all. Well, that's not there yet, but it's coming, maybe. We even have to wonder, unlike any generation before us, if we ourselves will bring an end to the earth, or at least to life upon it. Well, folks, that is kind of an ultimate question. We have seen the devastation that a nuclear bomb, no, there was two of them, two nuclear bombs can bring. And don't forget, it was us who used those weapons. We are burning down the rainforest. The changing climate is causing a lot of the U.S. forests to be burned. Trees clean out the air. What's going to happen when our trees are gone, before they can return? Will we have air to breathe? When will our leaders listen to science and to doctors? We've lost over 232,000 people, or thereabouts, to COVID in 8 months. Yet we have a leader here who says, it's going away, don't worry. Don't wear a mask, it won't hurt you. And in other countries, they are taking measures to protect their people. They are more concerned with not killing their citizens than they are with the price of stocks and the reactions to the stock market makes. I hold hope and I pray for change at the upper levels of our government to implement plans that actually take care of people. I wish I was in a better place personally. I wish I could be your pastor that says just the right thing to every single one of you today. To ease your anxieties, to bolster your resolve, to help you see through to the future that you want. But I'm not sure that I can. I'm an old gay white guy. I can get away with a lot because I'm an old white guy. But I've also been very aware of the rights that I have had to fight for, that I'm appreciative of, and that will hurt deeply if they are taken away. Many of you were here in this same building when I got married to Dawn after 25 years. Because we could never get married before. I was at General Synod in Cleveland when the ruling came in from the Supreme Court. I went out into the hall from the meeting I was sitting in, and all up and down the corridor you could hear the cheers as people's cell phones pinged to let them know the results from the Supreme Court. It was a moment that I stood and wept. It was a moment that made me feel like I was not part of an other, but was now an included person. If that right is taken away, I will be deeply crushed. That's just one example of rights that we hear might be taken away. I've been all over the place with this sermon. I wish I could just dive into the text and tell you, see, you should always be prepared so you don't get locked out of the door. When we lived in California, a friend of Don's gave us an earthquake bag. Inside were candles, freeze-dried food, first aid kit, flashlights, water purifier, some other stuff. He wanted us to be prepared if, or rather, when the earthquake would come. Kind of like these bridesmaids are like our friend. They are prepared for the future. Others are like me, not so prepared. I've dragged that duffel bag around for about 20 years. It sits under the bathroom sink, ready to be thrown into the car, because we don't live where there are an active earthquake threat. We did live in Texas, where we had hurricane warnings and evacuations. And here you just never know about a forest fire, or maybe a blizzard, though I doubt I would be out of the house if that happened. So let me ask you a question. Were the bridesmaids who didn't share their oil right to do so? Are there times when we have to look out for others, but then times when we must protect what is ours? Again, it's 2020, an election week. And this just seems like the lectionary has spoken to a reading that is so fitting for our times. Maybe you don't see the parallels in life with this reading, but I do. I'm going to quit babbling. I'm going to ask you to reread this passage this week and let it just sit with you. I was talking with a friend on Friday and I said, my sermon just won't come together this week. And she replied to me, sometimes you leave them with more questions than answers, and that is opening their minds and perhaps their hearts. So don't be so hard on yourself. Someone, and perhaps, and I will bet more than one, will get something meaningful or insightful from what you say. So this parable, I think, hinges upon the open door and the door being closed. Think about that. When do we open doors? When do we close doors? When is the other locked out? When is the other welcomed in? You've heard my words today from my heart to my mouth. So friends, regardless of who you want elected, take a moment to let yourself breathe, to be calm and be optimistic. If you need to talk, get in touch with me, because chances are that I need to talk too. Blessings to you all. And I hope this has been helpful, enlightening for you in some way. Amen and God bless.